Johannes?
Yeah, just two remarks. The first one is, I think right now in the West, we are the first generation to run a large-scale experiment to actually try to do Western things cut loose from our spiritual roots. And this is like cutting a flower off its roots. It's still beautiful for, let's say, 3 or 4 days. And then it starts to fall apart. I know we are all thinkers and doers in this room, but I do believe there are some things that cannot be thought through intellectually alone, and there are some things that cannot be done by human effort alone. So there is a spiritual realm as well. So I think we should never underestimate the power of prayer. So Western civilization, after the downfall of the Roman Empire, was not just constructed on doers and thinkers, but it was actually monks who started prayer houses and monasteries who prayed through that spiritual atmosphere. And second quick remark on the concept of sacrifice. I very much resonate with what you said, Jordan. And there is one aspect in the Christian story as well, which is God himself sacrificing. So basically not us being the first one, but basically that pure gift of grace without any expectations, you could say, enables us to then freely give ourselves back to God in a loving relationship, which to me seems to be the concept of grace, which is very, very foundational to our society.
Johannes, I was most interested when you were on that panel about the civilizational moment. And you brought up the question of the need for prayer. What's the significance of that to you? I mean, what does that mean exactly?
See, there are some things in life that you can actually control, and there are some things you can understand. And I would say in the West, we tend to overestimate the two. There are other aspects of life too. There's something you cannot control, something you cannot understand logically alone. So this is the realm of mystery. So I think we are spiritual beings and not rational beings alone. So therefore prayer needs to be an essential part of human life. Otherwise I think we become shallow and superficial.
And you have devoted your life. You are now somebody who is in contact with a lot of people. I take it mostly German, is that right? I mean, mostly in Germany. People who are seeking that spiritual side of life.
They are.
And you, what do? Do you facilitate their prayer? Is that what you do?
Yeah, first of all, it's completely right. There are so many people looking for spirituality. I mean, it's a sad thing. They look outside the churches. But oftentimes the churches aren't even well equipped to address them. So they look for other religions. So what I try to do is first on YouTube, my public lectures, my books, I try to find a vocabulary that is easily understood by people who are not churched, right? But who have spiritual desires. And then the second thing is we create conferences or spaces that make it easy aesthetically and logically to enter prayer, to actually experience God. So I do believe that spirituality, Christian spirituality, was never out of time, so to speak. It's just we have lost ways to speak about it and to flesh it out for a moment as such time.
What is it about the churches, the established churches, which puts people on? I mean, why do people find churches so off-putting?
I think one of the reasons is they are not spiritual enough. I mean, honestly, I have very friends in the so-called New Age spiritual non-religious movement, and some of those friends, they are way more spiritual than the average Christian is. A friend of mine is a yoga teacher. She does 2 hours of yoga every single day, which is totally normal in the yoga, circles. Have you ever met a Christian who prays for 2 hours a day? I mean, maybe a monk or a hermit, right? But it's like so outrageous. So Christianity is reduced to something Sunday morning or on Christmas Eve, something like that. But a daily spiritual practice out of which we're enabled to live a deeper and more fulfilled life, I think could be very attractive to many people. But do we teach people to do that? Do we flesh it out? I doubt it. I don't see it so much.
Do you believe this is a civilizational moment? I mean, that was the name of the panel you were on. And this whole gathering is, as it were, trying to formulate a response to what is seen at the moment as some sort of crisis.
Well,
I mean, do you believe that?
I believe we could be at the verge of it, right? What we see, like the mental health crisis. The mental health crisis, of course, is a social crisis, but it's also a spiritual crisis. The drug abuse crisis has a spiritual dimension. The fragmentation of our societies, even you could say the challenges for democracy, they all those crises have a religious/spiritual dimension to it. Are we seeing the crisis strongly enough already for us to rethink our ways? I doubt it. So probably we're only on the verge of it, but more and more people, I think, start to ask the right questions. And one of the questions is, what have we lost? Where have we cut ourselves loose from our spiritual roots without no civilization can survive?
I loved your analogy which you used in your address when you said that we're like the cut flower.
Yeah.
You know, the idea that the flower with roots goes on flourishing. You cut the flower, it remains beautiful for a few days, but then it wilts and it dies. And is that how you see Western civilization at the moment? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I do. But I'm not without hope. And of course, see, there is something. The West was never rooted in Christian spirituality alone, you know. There were always good and bad things because the civilization cannot be baptized. There was not kingdom on earth. So does the West also need to repent? Do some old structures have to die? Yes, right? We are not people of the past. But still, there are some elements of wisdom, of tradition, of spirituality, yes, that we have lost. And I think we're running a large-scale experiment to see how that goes. And I think eventually it will not end well.
So are you a little bit pessimistic about the future?
I think I'm realistic. I tend to be more optimistic than pessimistic because human beings are not stupid, right? Human beings have the capacity to repent, to change their ways. But I do believe that we are going to see more and more the downside of the so-called Enlightenment movement, a liberation movement, which was told as a big liberating story, cutting loose from restraint. But I think we find ourselves cutting ourselves loose of reality.
Yes. So the Enlightenment, of course, brought many good things. But what is it that we have lost? Perhaps it's the thing which you actually, in your professional life, are exploring and discovering. This question of the essential nature of spirituality.
Yes.
That spirituality is essential for human flourishing.
That spirituality is essential, but spirituality needs to be rooted in truth. So I'm not speaking about narcissistic self meditating, whatever, circling around yourself. So the whole liberation story of Enlightenment was told for decades as a purely positive thing. I mean, it started after World War II with the whole thing, the dialectics of Enlightenment. But I think we're seeing the first generation now with Gen Zers who really paid a price, right? They see the fragmentation of society. Their parents aren't married. There is no religion anymore. Back in the 60s to 70s, the liberation from traditional gender roles, the liberation from religion was still sold as a liberation story. And maybe it was. Maybe it was needed, just like in puberty, you have to cut yourself loose from some restraints. But I think really the mental health crisis with Gen Z being the most liberated and most depressed
generation with most choices and feeling totally overwhelmed by those choices, they see the downside of it. So therefore my thesis is that we have also lost contact, or we are prone to lose contact with reality itself.
Jordan Peterson makes much of this idea of sacrificial reciprocity. The idea that you can't reach maturity as an individual. You can't become a mature man or a mature woman unless you're prepared to make sacrifices on a personal and societal level. And marriage is an obvious vehicle for that reciprocity, because both sides have to compromise. Is that something you agree with? I mean, is that something that when you talk to young, depressed people, does this message of the necessity for sacrifice, the necessity for self-restraint, does that resonate with people?
I mean, there's a reason for Jordan's success, especially with young males. So I do believe he has a big point here. I would add two things, which I did on the panel as well. The first thing being that there is something which you cannot do and not manipulate, and even not self-optimize yourself into. So this is the spiritual realm. A genuine spiritual transformation is something that you cannot will, that you cannot make happen. And inasmuch as Jordan is understood in this regard, he is just one more self-help guru. I'm not saying he is, but he can well be understood as one. And the second thing is, there is in the Christian, not just tradition, in the Christian reality, is not just sacrifice. We offer ourselves up to God, but God giving himself in his Son. So this is the aspect of grace. And I think if we lose that, then we are only, I don't know, right-wing, conservative, whatever we are. So the point that the left has is the element of grace. I mean, the left has many flaws, but the concept that, no, it's not just only you have to get your acts together and then you will be rewarded. This would be even a misunderstanding of the Old Testament. The Old Testament has some elements of that, but even the Old Testament goes farther than that. But then comes Jesus, who has really transformed our perspective on the topic of sacrifice in a more profound way, and entered or brought in that element of undeserved grace.
Let me ask you this finally. What is your relationship like with the established churches? I mean, do they see you, are you a sort of, are you a competitor that they resent, or are you seen as a fellow brother in arms fighting the same battle? How does it work?
I have huge respect for the established churches. I'm Catholic myself, and I would never dare to, let's say, make up my own religion. I think that's stupid. I try to walk in unity and bring Christians together. And within the established churches, there are some who love me, some who hate me. But basically, I work very well with bishops in different denominations, and I consider myself one of many Christians on different levels. So this is not the epicenter of Christianity, what we're trying to do. We are not reinventing Christianity. But yes, the established churches need reformation and need a spiritual transformation.
How is the church doing? How is the Catholic Church doing in Germany, do you think?
Well, it's a certain tension due to a movement called the synodal path, which started some years ago, which put us in a little bit funny position, which is very distinct from all the nations around. I would say the church in the whole of Europe is, of course, finding itself in a more and more secularized society, but they are starting to get their acts together, to become missional again, missions-oriented, to actually find out we're just one player amongst many, so we have to start to evangelize. The church in Germany is still a little bit slow on that, because we keep debating those issues of more lay involvement and female priesthood and sacraments and all those things, which are points you could debate about, but actually for 99% of the non-church goers, these questions are completely irrelevant. If you don't believe in God, you're not bothered by the fact that priests are not allowed to marry. This is not your problem at all. So therefore, I think in Germany, we will need some more years to actually get that missional turnaround to happen.
I was very interested by what the Coptic Archbishop said, when he said that the church's existence throughout history has always been one where there has been persecution, there has been difficulties.
Yes.
And I think that is actually, paradoxically, that is quite a hopeful and optimistic way of looking at where we are today.
I totally agree. I've traveled to many nations where the church is persecuted, and I've never found Christians more vibrant in their faith than in those places, like China, like India, like the Middle East. You can learn Christianity there, and maybe the new situation we find ourselves in, strangers in a strange land, so to speak, maybe is not to the worst, right? Maybe we can learn something to be more humble, to be more resilient, and to be more prayerful and more spiritual, because this is what the persecuted church definitely is.
Johannes Hartl, so many thanks. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
If you've enjoyed watching this interview, and I hope you have, and you'd like to see more of this kind of work, you might care to consider making a small donation. If you go to our website, newhumanum.org, and follow the links, you'll find a donation page. Anything you can give us would be gratefully received.